Institute of Demography. She could not be here with us because she had an accident. We are sorry about that, but we are very grateful, Sonia, here you are. We are very grateful that you could join us online. She's gonna do a presentation on motherhood and skills across the life course. So, Sonia, the floor is yours.
Hi, everyone. Can you see and hear me well? Hi, hey, welcome everyone. I wish I could be there with you in person, and I wish I could have enjoyed that Spanish lunch too. Do you hear me?
Yes, we can, but we had
super, okay, perfect.
A technical issue here. No, no.
Perfect.
Yeah, you are.
So, I'll be talking about motherhood and skills across the life course. We will Pardon me, there seems to be a delay.
No?
No?
I think it's okay now, Sonia. Sorry about that.
Okay, super. No worries. So I'll be talking about motherhood and skills across the life course, and we will explore together if and how motherhood affects skills and what implications this has for the labor market. And with this, I will set the scene for the super interesting panel discussion on women and skills that will follow. This talk is very much related to the motherhood effect, or some of you might know this as the motherhood penalty. It's this very established finding that women and men have the same labor market trajectories and similar incomes on average up until the moment where there is their first birth happening, which is when the income of mothers drops drastically, whereas that of fathers is virtually unchanged. Let's look at how this looks like in a country with very long career interruptions and a very long very large motherhood penalty, namely Austria. What you see here is employment around the first birth for the sample of PIAC participants.
Sonia?
Yes?
I think we cannot see your PowerPoint. I think you're showing it, but if you can try again, yes. Sorry about that.
Of course.
Not yet. Now it's perfect.
Hello.
Yeah, now it's perfect.
Okay. But this was the slide on the motherhood effect. And here you see employment around the first birth in Austria for the sample of PIAC participants. No worries. That's weird. Because before it worked, right? I'm trying again. Yeah. Can you see it now? I can also try it without slides, but I promise it's way more interesting with slides. I can do the crazy thing where I exit Zoom and re-enter. Yeah, I can hear you. Yes. Sure, we can try that. I can also try to quickly exit Zoom and then re-enter again. Okay. Then we just do it with the slides. No, this is, I don't have that many slides. That's just because it's a PDF. 3 hours later. No. um, now I can see it, yes. Yes, yeah. So if you could go to the second next slide. The next one. Super. So what you see here is, remember we talked about the motherhood penalty, and we talked about how it looks very pronounced in Austria. So what you see here is based on register data for all PIAC participants of cycle 1 in Austria. And you see that in the years before and after the first birth, the labor market trajectories of mothers and fathers are virtually identical. Anything dark blue here means that they are employed. Anything red means that they're unemployed. Next slide, please. We see now that in the year before of the birth, mothers are on maternity leave. That's the slightly blue area that you can see. And on the next slide, you will see that after that, mothers are on parental leave. That's the rosy color. Nothing happens for fathers except for a tiny dip that is the paternity leave, the daddy month. In the third year, that's the next slide, or the second year, you can see that mothers have still not really returned to the labor market. Only about 50% of the mothers have returned to the labor market, and we know that most of them did so part-time. So they're not fully employed yet. And this doesn't recover in the third year either, so that would be the next slide now. So we know that this huge difference between women and men has huge implications for mothers' employment outcomes. It affects their earnings, it affects their life course trajectories, it affects their pension income. One question that I want to answer or try to answer with you today is whether it also affects their skills. Why is that? Next slide. So many researchers think that a part of the explanation for the motherhood wage penalty is that mothers lose human capital or skills during career interruptions. On the next slide, you will see a lot of quotes that we were collecting from different papers that argue that. For example, on the first one by Minza and Polashek, that's a very seminal paper from the 70s, you can see that they argue during the period of childbearing and childcare, prolonged non-participation may cause the skills acquired at school and at work to depreciate. Next slide, please. That makes a So why would researchers think that mothers lose skills during absence from work? Maybe you can just show the whole text on the slide. Yes. Back. Go. Go. Go back, please. Go back. Yeah. Thank you very much. So we know that those skills, I'm sure, so we've discussed it today in the conference, or others have, that these cognitive skills like numeracy and literacy, they have huge labor market returns. The higher those skills on average, the higher wages. There is also some evidence that shows that gender differences in those skills explain gender differences in wages. That's the work by Rebollo Sanz and De La Rica here, or by Crystal and Köppel-Turina. They use PIAC data to show that. Next slide, please. And here, just show the whole text. Otherwise, I have to say next too often. Thank you. So this is why researchers have thought that skill loss during career break might explain lower wages of mothers. That there is an atrophy from underuse. If skills are not regularly used, they deteriorate. The issue is, though, that earlier evidence has mostly derived this from declining wages. So they found that after long career interruptions, mothers have lower wages, and they believe that this was due to skills. Only recently, thanks to data like PIAC, are we able to measure skills directly, not just changes in wages, but really changes in skills. And there are also other sources that allow to do that, and that have shown, for example, that time away from paid work leads to lower literacy and numeracy scores. A very recent paper by Jessen et al., this is still a working paper but will come out soon, has also shown that there exist child penalties in numeracy scores. What you see here is numeracy scores of women and men before and after they had their first child. The pink line is that of women and the blue line that of men, and there is a small decrease in numeracy skills after the birth of the child. Of course, PIAC doesn't have a longitudinal dimension, so what they did here is that they applied a pseudo-panel approach to get to this result. Next slide, please. I suggest we skip this since we've already used some time, but what I want to get to now is the question, do child-related career interruptions really lower skills along the life course? So we've seen some scattered evidence for it. We've shown that skills might decrease after the birth of a child, but it's still not clear if career interruptions are the reason for it. Next slide, please. To get to this question, or to get to this answer, I should say, we have had the idea to link numeracy skills to parental leave policies, because parental leave policies define how long mothers and also fathers can interrupt their careers. So what we did was we collected data on 21 European countries and their parental leave regulations from 1970 to 2020 to link those changes in the policies to changes in numeracy skills. And what you can see on this graph is that from 1970 to 2020, the duration of leave that parents could take increased a lot. That's the increase that you can see there along the different leave types. I'm super excited about this data set. It's publicly available, so you can also use it for your own research. But we used it to link it to numeracy skills. Next slide, please. And I suggest you go to the next slide. Thank you. No, the one before. The next one, yes. So you can see that these policies changed a lot, and they changed at different levels and in a different pace along the different countries in our sample. And we used this as exogenous variation to explain the effect of career interruptions on numeracy. What we had to do, though, was we had to link the year of the reform, the year of the policy change, to the year of the birth of the child. And unfortunately, we did not get this for all PIAC countries. We wrote to all the countries and we asked them, can you give us the birth year of the child? And we didn't get it. So in the end, we had to do this analysis with SHARE, the Survey of Health and Aging and Retirement in Europe, because they also have a numeracy test, which should be shown on the next slide, I think. Yes, I don't want to go through the details. There is a numeracy score in SHARE. It is by no way as detailed as in PIAC, but we think it's good enough for our analysis. On the next slide, you can see that, on the next one, you can see that also in SHARE, numeracy skills differ by education. They're higher for the high educated and lower for the low educated. And the next one should show that there's also differences in occupation in this numeracy score. Professionals have a higher numeracy score than those in elementary occupation. So what are the results from this analysis? This should be shown on the next slide. This starts feeling like PowerPoint karaoke. The main finding of our analysis is that it looks like each additional year of statutory parenting leave reduces mothers' numeracy scores by 3 to 5%. So for one additional year of statutory leave, numeracy scores of mothers decrease a little bit. In the short run, this can be explained because longer entitlements lead to longer uptake. So the longer a mother is allowed to stay at home, the longer she is at home. What was interesting is that we found that the longer the entitlement, the shorter the years in employment of that mother. So it looks like mothers that were at home for a very long time, subsequently, they spent less year in employment. They had a much more scattered employment trajectory. And we think that that led to a lower use of skills along the life course. And that explains why those women ultimately had a lower numeracy score. Next slide, please, or next PowerPoints. It's important to note, however, that this decrease in the numeracy score is by no means enough to explain the remaining unexplained part of the motherhood penalty. So while we find small decreases, we conclude that human capital lost during career interruptions is not important for the motherhood penalty. Instead, the remaining part might be to things such as flexibility in jobs and a penalty to that, or discrimination. So should we not worry about long career interruptions then when it comes to skills? Well, let me show another slide. Many European countries and beyond try to lower the skill shortage in their countries by encouraging mothers to re-enter the labor force, especially in countries like Austria, where so many mothers are working part-time. So we did an analysis where we compared the employment patterns and the parenting leave patterns of high-skilled mothers with that of low-skilled mothers. And as you can see at the graph here, on the top right, you have the high-skilled mothers, and on the top left, you have the low-skilled mothers. There is hardly any difference. Gender trumps skills. Even the high-skilled mothers, they stay away from the labor market for 2 years, 3 years, and even longer. And when they go back part-time. So for me, this is a clear sign that there should be more encouragement and more opportunities for mothers to re-enter the workforce quickly, especially those with high skills. It doesn't seem like they lose skills when they are away from the job, but those skilled mothers are away from the job for a long, long time. Thank you very much, and thank you for staying with me through this Zoom presentation.
I didn't even press the mic. So, I didn't even introduce myself. So my name is Marta Encinas-Martín. I work at the OECD and the Global Relations Directorate. I used to work on the PIAC team for many years. And I'm going to ask to join the scene to Irene, Marina, and Victoria to start the panel. Next to me. Thank you very much. So we are going to be talking about gender, skills, PIAC, what PIAC tell us about gender, and how over the past X number of years things have evolved. And during the lunchtime we were talking about this actually. And something that has evolved for me is that the first conference, PIAC conference, took place in 2013. In Washington, we did it with ETS, the PIAC provider. And I remember in that conference, I was actually fighting to have women in the panels because they were all men. All the economists were men. I only managed to put 2 women out of all of them. And in this conference, 12 years later, most of us are women. So there's been a change at least. That's what I think. So I have with me Irene Rioboo. Hi. She is currently a researcher at the European Institute for Gender Equality, EIGE, in Lithuania. Prior to joining EIGE, she held positions at the Eurostat and Eurofund, and also has extensive academic background as professor of applied economics. And with this background, I wanted to ask you a question about PIAC. What makes PIAC a high-quality statistical source for analyzing gender inequalities? Irene?
Hello, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you very much for the invitation to participate in this roundtable with this so interesting topic. Next time, maybe would be nice to have some men talking about gender equality, which is also a big challenge.
We must say that other panels are also many women.
Yeah.
It's not the only one.
No, it's fantastic. Thank you very much. And so about your question, well, PIAC is a unique source, and I can highlight 3 key elements that make PIAC so relevant for gender analysis. One is the topic itself, so adult self-skills. This is a topic that is on the core of the policy agenda. I'm speaking mainly about the EU, right? Because it's my work, but I would say in general. And PIAC offers us direct information. So direct information about the skills. It's not offering proxies. It's something that was mentioned before, no? And this is extremely relevant because in that way, we know exactly the gaps in numeracy, literacy, and so on. So we can develop policies that address those gaps and that are based on realities, not on assumptions, no? The second key aspect of PIAC is its robustness from the statistical point of view. So it's a very robust data source, and something extremely relevant for me working in a EU agency is that it provides harmonized data. So we have data for the EU 20, for more in this case, no, but we have harmonized data for all the countries that PIAC covers, which is extremely important to design policies, extremely important to compare countries, to establish goals, and so on. And on the third aspect, I want to stress something that you may find not very relevant, but in fact it's super relevant. That is, PIAC offers sex disaggregated data. Nowadays, we are still fighting for sex disaggregated data in many, many relevant topics. For instance, in income, that usually is provided at household level, not at individual level. So the fact that PIAC offers this information, disaggregated access, it's extremely relevant. And allow us to tackle the gender inequalities that appear since the moment that we are born. No? But PIAC goes beyond sex disaggregated data because offers also other socio-economic characteristics such as age, income, education level, migration background, many other socio-economic characteristics that allow us to run what we call intersectional analysis, to study how gender interacts with other characteristics, like age, for instance, and that interaction shapes the skills, opportunities, development, and so on. With an intersectional analysis, we are able to identify the women and men that come from most vulnerable groups, and also because women and men are not homogeneous groups, no? So we need to identify which are the more vulnerable group in order to design effective policies that address the needs of the people that are more in need. So to summarize, the robustness of the PIAC data, the fact that can allow us to run comparisons across countries, and the fact that allow us to study gender inequalities with this intersectional perspective make PIAC a fundamental source for gender analysis. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You just made the PIAC team happy. And actually, the PIAC data set is the most used data set at the OECD. Is very large and very good. And it leads me to Marina Bassi. She's here on my left. She's the lead economist at the World Bank. She's working other regions in the world that we also work with at the OECD, but less, like Latin America and Africa. And I would like your perspective on these other countries, no? On where do you find that it's challenging to collect data, on why, and also what are the challenges for advancing women's skills and labor market participation? Could you tell us a little bit about that and opportunities?
Thank you, Marta. Good afternoon, all. It's a pleasure to be here, sharing a panel, this super interesting panel. So yes, I come from education, and I come from, working with low and middle income countries. So I would like to start providing some context of how youth arrive to the labor market. In the World Bank, we say that low and middle-income countries are facing a deep learning crisis, a crisis that has been developing over the years, where countries really were successful in expanding access to education, but quality really didn't improve at all. So we use an indicator, one of many, but which we call learning poverty, which is a percentage of children that by age 10 can read and understand a simple text. Almost end of primary reading, really, really basic skills. That in Latin America, before the pandemic, reached 59%. So 59% could not read and understand a very simple text. That was before the pandemic. After the pandemic, the data is hard to compare. We don't have full data yet, but estimates tell us that that number increased probably to around 80%. 8 out of 10 children almost finish primary school without being able to understand a basic text. And then PISA results, which we have for like 10 Latin American countries, confirm that things do not improve over the years in teenage years. 45% of the PISA-assessed students reach minimum proficiency at reading. In math, it's similar, it's even worse, 25% compared to 74% in OECD countries. So that is how they get to the labor market. Really, the school is really failing to provide these children with basic skills. And this is Latin America. Africa is really more serious. So, but in terms of gender, like it fails both with girls and boys similarly. Gender gaps appear probably in choosing career paths, with girls really underrepresented in STEM fields, which we know have high returns, we know are key in this digital transformation and green transition. In Latin America, for example, only 40% of graduates, STEM graduates, are women, and that goes from 19% in Chile, our star in PISA, for example. So we get really, really dispersed results. And it varies by field. Like in engineering, we have only 25% of graduates are female, computer science around 40, AI, like 1 in 5 professionals in AI are women. So there's a really big gap in segmentations of the labor market. And then the final, I would say, context-specific or a characteristic that is aggravated in low and middle-income countries is the skills that workers develop in the labor market. Also, the World Bank report, the last human capital flagship, changes a little bit the perspective of how human capital is accumulated, complementing the life cycle perspective, which we know is important, with where, in the location in which the skills are developed, arguing that the skills develop within the family, within neighborhood schools and where facilities, and within the job. Like, it's not only using skills in the job, but you also can develop or lose, depending on the quality of job you have, with better access to technology, with better management practices, with better quality of coworkers. So, like, you see that, for example, returns to experience to self-employed are much lower. They start similarly, but are much lower over the years than employees in large firms. Same with microfirms. And again, in Latin America and low-income countries, the share of workers, the self-employed is around 78%, compared to 11% in high-income countries. And those who work as salaried workers, like 80% work in microfirms. So really the possibilities, the opportunities of developing skills in the labor market are really, really serious, and that is particularly true for women. So many do not participate of the labor market at all, and many, those that do it in a low quality job. So these are like the sources of gender gaps in skills development that I would say are more visible or more present in low and middle income countries.
Thank you so much, Marina. You did mention about engineering and the lack of women there, which is not just in Latin America or Africa, it's all over. And the area of STEM where we see very few women. I mean, in both PISA and PIAC, we see the skills of women and men, I mean, they do differ, but not so much. However, the choices they make, the careers they choose, they're very different, which it leads me to Victoria Cummings, who works at SEMI, right, with the microelectronics industry. An industry where we don't find many women, even less than in STEM in general. And she also oversees the European Chips Skills Academy and the European Chips Diversity Alliance. And I have a question for you. If you can see that there are also some challenges and barriers that women experience entering high-tech sectors, like me with technology. And if you could please tell us about these barriers and if there are different compared to barriers we see across the entire labor market.
Yeah, thank you very much for the invitation. First of all, I'm very happy to be here and be, the voice of industry for this panel, because I will apologize in advance that I don't have a lot of nice flashy data to show you. I'm not a researcher myself, so you'll have to deal with my anecdotal evidence and a few kind of company examples that we're able to get on this topic. But before I get into your question, Marta, I also want to acknowledge Sonja's presentation, as I thought it was a very interesting way to start this discussion, especially looking at it from the example of the semiconductor industry and the high-tech fields. A lot of the problems that we see in terms of women returning from maternity leave is in fact that the technology has progressed far beyond from where it was even 3 years ago. It's not so much the decline in skills for us, but it's especially now with things like AI, it's the practices inside the manufacturing facilities. They've maybe automated things, they've changed how the tools work. So you can return with 100% of the skills that you left with, but maybe those skills themselves are not exactly relevant anymore. So we have this constant need to reskill and upskill, especially from people who have returned from longer leaves of absences. But so then, speaking about women entering the semiconductor industry in general, we actually have done recently a long-term study across the European industry about some of the factors that have driven the women to the industry, but then also some of the gaps and the hurdles that they've seen along their development. So it should be no surprise to everybody here that a lot of these barriers start as young as 5, 6 years old. I know personally speaking, you try as a woman to enter some kind of complex maths, calculus classes, and your professor will tell you, no, maybe that's not for you. And we hear that time and time again from young girls that they've maybe been encouraged to go a particular way because it makes more sense for their gender, or just the role models that they've seen in their daily life, their moms, their other teachers. They see more careers that seem to be suited for women that are not high-tech careers. So that's something that we focus a lot on with the Diversity Alliance, how we can make some of these role models in the industry stand out for young girls and give them something to look up to. But then even as you progress to, upper university degrees, to your early starts in the career, there's also company issues that we need to tackle for improving the access that women have to some of these resources, but also supporting them in their future career development. So individualized mentorship is one big thing that we've seen has really worked across companies, making sure that women are paired up with not only older professional women to give them kind of the guidance that they need to succeed in these fields, but also making sure that they're connecting with the other men in the industry. Because it sounds kind of silly, we need to connect women with men in a male-dominated field, but it's also helpful for them to help them navigate something that is not necessarily made for them. They need to understand how the field works, what it takes for them to succeed, and sometimes that means also talking to men.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much, Victoria. Very good point. I'm going to do another round on questions, and I would like to ask the public to ask questions to our panelists. Also, Sonja is here with us, so after, just start thinking of what you can get from the questions. So I'm going to go back to Irene. And in this round, I want to focus more on solutions, so we kind of develop a bit the challenges and also on policies and data needs. So Irene, why is the understanding of the gender skills gap crucial for addressing long-term inequalities?
Yeah, so it's crucial because it helps us to know and to understand when the inequalities started, how the inequalities start to be accumulated, and also to understand that, in fact, there are persistent inequalities along the life course of women and men. So considering all this information, we collect the data necessary to know the implications and how to act, and how to solve these implications. So let me start giving some little evidences that some of them are very well known. Evidences on segregation, on invisible skills, and also on how we perceive and we see differences in the use of the skills. No? So about gender segregation, we know that despite that women are highly educated nowadays, there are enormous differences, gender differences in terms of participation in STEM fields and ICT fields, both in education and in the labor market. So nowadays in the European Union, around 30% of graduates in STEM are women. And this has big implications, because what happens in education doesn't start and ends in education, but it has an implication in the future development of citizens. No implications also in how to shape the labor market. And the same if we move to the labor market. 20% of the ICT specialists in the labor market in the EU are women, only 20%, so 80% are men. So these gender gaps are extremely relevant with very important consequences. Also, I want to talk about the invisible gaps in skills, because there are certain skills that come from unpaid work, let's say, that are not valued. And we know that women are carrying the majority of the care work, unpaid care work. So this means that their skills are not really valued or properly valued, and are invisible in the formal skills assessment systems or in the labor market systems. And also the other aspect is the utilization of the skills. No? As mentioned before, women are very highly educated, but this is not translated into, it's not translated proportionally into leadership positions, in the decision-making positions, or in high salary occupations, right? And all of these have extremely important consequences through the life course of women and men. So we need to know that those consequences are not only individual, as we already mentioned, on salaries, or on care gaps, pension gaps, but are also societal and economic consequences. At EIGE, we ran a project on the economic benefits of gender equality, and we saw that reducing the gender gap in STEM graduates could imply an increase of up to 1.2 million of employers by 2050, and also an increase of up to 3% of the EU GDP, which is enormous. So all the implications are at individual level and at societal level. It's not only a matter of fairness, it's a matter of economic growth, if we want to put it in terms of money, which sometimes is useful. Thank you.
Indeed, no, I heard you presented this data before, and it's quite unbelievable, because it's not that Europe is not putting a lot of money into getting women into STEM, and the rest of the world too, but it just doesn't seem to be working. I don't know, Victoria, you had a question for her as well about this.
Yeah, like I mentioned, this is something that we are really looking into as an industry because, as was mentioned yesterday from Wind Europe, we also have a talent shortage problem where we're looking for about 65,000 people to enter the industry by 2030 just to keep up with the existing demand that we have. And so as part of that, a lot of people in the industry have kind of looked around at their teams and gone, oh my God, where are the women? Is this maybe something that we can tap into? And so when we're discussing kind of skills and training programs, a lot of people tend to wonder what needs to change in order to make this appealing to women. And so I hear a lot of times like this should be something linked to sustainability, we should link this to medical devices, you know, the traditional care sectors that women are drawn to. And it's something that I, as a knee-jerk reaction, I kind of oppose because it seems like feeding more into the gender stereotypes. So I'm curious to see what kind of research or what kind of ideas have come out of this and why STEM isn't being, you know, uniformly attractive to women.
Well, it's. I could say that this could be the topic of a doctoral thesis, right? So, I could say that gender stereotypes are the core of the majority of gender inequalities. So it's the explanation of inequalities in labor market, in care per se, in earnings, pensions. So in every topic we tackle, gender stereotypes are there. In the case of skills and why women are not able to participate in the same way that men do, we see a key role also in norms and gender stereotypes because this is affecting to the perception that women and men have about themselves, which comes from the childhood. It affects also to the choices that they are making along the life course. And it affects to segregation. So we need policies that work directly to the root of the inequalities and work directly on those stereotypes. The good thing or the good message that we can have here is that gender stereotypes are created by us, are created by the society. So the society can break them as well. So it's something that we have to work on, and we need to reinforce from every single step since the very early childhood. But it's possible because it's in our hands. It's possible to break those barriers.
True, thank you. It's like football is a men's sport in Europe, but a women's sport in South Africa, for example. So the stereotypes go there. So and it leads to, since we are talking about policies, what kind of policies or programs have proven effective or could actually break this gender skills gap? Maybe you know about that, Marina, or you can tell us some examples.
Yes, I would, based on our answers and this discussion, I would refer to two types of projects. One that boost female labor force participation in general, another one that tries to increase the presence of women in STEM areas. Starting from that, and like continuing the current discussion, I would cite, for example, the curriculum and this trying to fight or change these stereotypes. Many times that was reflected even in the books in the curriculum of the countries, portraying the man engineer and the female nurse. So in Brazil, for example, in a big reform for secondary education that they did, they really focus on removing all kind of stereotypes in textbook and materials and trying to improve teacher practices regarding gender bias, and that had a very important effect. Mentorship programs, also having a female engineer, a woman engineer, like in Peru, for example, in more than 100 schools, graduates or students, engineers, students in top universities went and visited and talked to students and girls, and that really increased the interest of mostly higher performance girls into STEM areas.
They went into those careers?
Yes.
Okay, that's fantastic.
So that was very effective. Just providing information on returns to education to students, to secondary education students, proved to be effective, especially for girls. For example, in Mexico, we supported a program like that. In St. Lucia also went deeper, like they wanted to promote women in the energy sectors, and in collaboration with trainers, with Tibet institutes, first the women received scholarships, then apprenticeships and job fairs, and that also increased the presence of women in those sectors a lot. And in terms of female labor force participation, well, in every program, generally it's a bundle of different interventions that make it more effective, but providing childcare is essential in Latin America, expanding access to childcare. In El Salvador, for example, we are supporting a program that provides training in social emotional skills, digital skills, financial skills, technical skills in certain sectors with a focus on women, and they provide a top-up like a stipend for mothers, and that is proven to be very effective for them to complete the training and move into the labor market. So different examples in different contexts, but very similar to what Irene and Victoria were discussing.
Thank you. Yeah, I think mentorships are good, but scholarships are better, right? Supporting financially girls and women are proven more effective. I also want to ask Victoria about programs that companies have implemented and to reduce these barriers, that you can give us examples.
Yeah, I have two good examples from the top of my head. So I have one that kind of adds on to Marina's point from the education standpoint, and that's a really cool program that we've seen come out of Ireland. And so this is particularly talking about vocational education, because when we, as the microchip industry, we talk about the gender gap, a lot of the times we're referring to the highly skilled electrical engineers and similar profiles, but in fact the gender gap gets much, much worse when you get to maintenance technicians and other vocational profiles. So we work with a program, Fast Track to IT in Ireland, and they have been working to improve the number of women who are taking their vocational track courses. And so they tried a few things in mixed courses, but then they decided to try an all-female track. And they realized very quickly that 16 out of 16 women graduated from the track, they went on to careers, whereas in the mixed classes, you typically had 50% of the women drop out. So they talked to these women, they followed up with them after they'd been in their careers for a few years and sort of asked them, why did this help you, whereas other women weren't able to do so in a mixed class? And a lot of the answers were actually kind of sad. It was a lot of bullying from their male counterparts, so making them feel like they didn't belong in the space. But when you had the all-female courses, there was a lot of, girls supporting girls, and everyone felt a bit more comfortable. They could make mistakes, they could ask questions, and it was a much more inviting environment for them. And so that's one from the education side, but then when we look at the company side, when you're talking about retention and career development for women, I want to shout out Soitec, one of the companies that we work with, as they have about a 10% increase of female distribution in their companies, whereas in general it's about 22% women in the industry, but this particular company has about 35% women. So we asked them what are the main programs that have really supported this, and the big one that they wanted to point out was the personalized career development tracks. So a lot of times we see that women are more reluctant to ask for raises. They're not necessarily going to go to their management to ask for particular considerations to be made for them, either for maternity leave, as Sonja was mentioning, or for care leave, or for other kind of flexible situations they might have. But with this personalized career development, they had a set HR person who would sit down with them every 4 to 6 months, talk about how they felt in their career, where they were looking to go, and it helped put them on track for more promotions than the industry average and kept them in the field for longer.
Thank you very much. I read about these programs where there is only women, or countries like the Middle East and North Africa, where girls and boys are separated in a school, and then women do choose STEM careers, different reasons. That's interesting. I'm going to actually turn to the public for questions for our panelists and also for Sonja, who is still with us. So please raise your hand, and then we can ask, I'm sure you have lots of questions. There you go. There's Evera.
Hi, thank you very much. I had a question for Irene. Indeed, 3% increase in European GDP, it's a striking figure. But when you say increasing gender equity, do you mean redistributing the current supply of STEM graduates between men and female, or increasing female supply to reach parity? Because then it might be just an oversupply of highly paid jobs rather than an equity issue.
Yeah, the estimations are based on reaching gender equality in STEM education, so parity, 50-50. But this takes into account many previous steps that also in the modeling have impact in the cost. And if we talk about the GDP or in the employability, if we talk about these 1.2 million of more employed persons. So yes, for us, in the Gender Equality Institute, the ideal scenario is not that women reach the main position. The ideal scenario is to reach gender equality. Sometimes, for instance, in education, women, in some educational fields, women perform better than men. So if we analyze tertiary education participation, if we analyze some topics related to marks obtained, so in many occasions, the performance of women is much better than men. But this is not the ideal case for us. The ideal case is equality. So a situation where women performs better than men is penalized exactly in the same way than a situation when men performs better than women.
Thank you. Irene, more questions over there? Yeah.
Thanks. I'm interested in if you're looking sort of at the next level down. So the OECD did some work on looking at gender differences in terms of school outcomes and going into further education. And it was looking at the types of STEM courses that women choose and showing that women overwhelmingly are choosing to go into biology and chemistry, and the boys are going into ICT and engineering, which are the highly paid and more in-demand courses. I'm just wondering whether you're looking at those aspects as well, because what we don't want is girls going into STEM courses that don't have career paths and are not as highly paid as their counterparts, because they're not going to be getting the same outcomes. The second question I have is really, we're not going to get gender equity if we only look at getting more women into STEM. We also need to be looking at gender equity in other female-dominated occupations, and just interested in your thoughts about those and what we should be doing there, because the gender discussion is really dominated about what women should be doing and not looking at what men should be doing. So just interested in your thoughts, and really interesting that it is a panel of women, which is disappointing, because most of the discussions about gender equity tend to be dominated by women in a field that is largely dominated by men. So just interested in your reflections on that. Thank you.
Sure, thank you. Thank you very much. Good point about that, bringing women into fields dominated by men, but not in, for example, teaching or health. I remember the delegate from Australia at the OECD said, you need to present a plan to me to bring men into teaching, because if you take the women from there, then what I'm going to be doing, no? So you want to provide any answers to the questions, Victoria?
Yeah, I would like to comment briefly on a couple of the parts, because one thing, the biology link is something that we really see quite a lot. And when we talk about getting women into STEM, I completely agree with we have to channel them into the regions that need women in STEM. And so one thing that we've really been looking at is, from the company side, from the hiring managers, getting them to take a look at how they view these skills, because when it comes to biology graduates in particular, a lot of what the electrical engineers do is data analysis. So this is something that's already baked into biology education. And we want the HR team to maybe think, can we take these people that have biology backgrounds and maybe give them some fundamentals of electronics that they may need, but make use of these really good skills that they've already learned. And then the other point I want to touch on is actually about the all-women panel, because I find it quite funny because actually my colleague who runs the Diversity Alliance project is a man, but whenever we get invitations to these things, he asks me to go because he doesn't feel like he can comment on women's issues. I keep telling him, someone has to do it. I'm happy to be here, but I would have loved to see a man on the panel too.
Yeah, that's a good point for next time. Yeah, Anya?
Hi, I have a question for Sonja. Hi, Sonja, this is Anya. You obviously you're not a policymaker, but you work on very policy-relevant issues. I was wondering if you kind of have one or two key messages for policy that comes from the research that you've done so far. Is there anything that you want to tell people that are designing parental leave policies, for example, or maybe nothing, maybe?
Sorry, was this question directed to me? I didn't hear it so well.
Yes.
Do you want to repeat it?
Yes. But we're trying to repeat it in a different microphone.
You can could you repeat the questions? Yeah.
But I don't know. Can you hear me, Sonja? Yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah, it was to you, Sonia. Can you hear well?
This work, right?
Yes.
So it's notoriously difficult to change gender norms, especially in the German-speaking countries that a lot of our research was based on. Like what we see from our policy data set, and their policy data set really compares policies across those 21 countries, is that in all countries, also due to EU directives, by now fathers are allowed to take some leave. And even in countries where you wouldn't expect that fathers are actually entitled to leave. In Austria, for example, they are entitled to the same amount of women, but they don't take it. When you look at the literature, it's a bit frustrating. It seems like not a lot works, but what seems to work well, or what's very important is that if there is a possibility to take leave, it has to come with sufficient benefits. Very anecdotally, in Austria, we had paternity leave for the past 8 years, and only 2 years ago did they double the benefits for that, and that really increased take-up of fathers. So I think one leverage to address the issues that we have shown of mothers staying at home for a very long time is to encourage the fathers to take their share, because someone has to take care of the children, right? So that's one possibility. A second one is to increase childcare facilities, but that doesn't. So from the evidence that we have, that doesn't work so well either, because those norms are really, really sticky. So I think the most important message that I would send is that to match those policies with sufficient benefits so that parents can actually afford being home, especially fathers.
Yeah, good point. Thank you very much, Sonia. Do we have time for another couple of questions? One over there.
Yeah, just in relation with this, well, I'm Juan Menendez, and I worked in Eurofound as Irene, by the way, some years ago. And just in relation with this, we did a research project based on data of the European Working Conditions Survey, where we identified, this pattern of reduction of working time by women during the parental years, and increase of working time of fathers, of men at the time. But we also asked about preferences. So women preferred to reduce, that's true, but men also wanted to reduce. They didn't. And that was when the debate at the European Union about the transferability or not transferability of the paternity and maternity leaves. And you know that there was a debate there. Do you think that this could force a bit more, because this is a decision taken by families, because at the beginning there's already small pay gap, and the family decision is that the father will work more hours and the mother won't. And the fact that even in countries where they have the same time for paternity and maternity, the take-up is different. So the issue, my question is about transferability of the entitlements. Thank you.
Thank you. Who wants to answer?
Well, I can try. Yeah, that's a key aspect. The policies and the current research advise to reduce the transferability and to provide leaves that cannot be taken fully by women because of the impact that this could have in their future working life, no? In their coming back to employment, in the career progress, in the pensions, and so on. So here, something that could be a decision, an individual decision among couples, becomes again a structural barrier because it's a decision that is sustained on stereotypes, is sustained on gender pay gaps, or many times it's like a family economic decision. So there are it's a very complex situation. If I have to find one factor that could be extremely important to tackle is again gender stereotypes. We have a recent survey from the Commission, from the Eurobarometer, that was on gender stereotypes, and one of the conclusions was that in many EU countries, more than 70% of the population considered that women was a better carer and considered that women should take care of their children. So this is what we have in our society, and I think we have to tackle even in policies related to parenthood, to parental leave. Yeah.
It's how can we? It is hard to change those beliefs. How can we? Is there any way that we can help through policies to change other than parenthood, which is already a very good one, no? Maybe Sonja?
Yeah, that's a key question, right? How to change beliefs.
Yeah.
I'm an economist and demographer. That's a question I will leave for the sociologists and psychologists. I'm sorry, I know that's cowardly, but that's, yeah, it's difficult. We can hope that in demography there is the theory of that things change by cohorts. But that's very speculative, yeah.
Well, starting early is always better. So programs in school, again, for example, I've worked in Africa, several programs addressing gender-based violence or this strong stereotype of the role of the woman in the family. And those programs involved boys in adolescence. So it's like not talking only to having mentors or doing programs with girls, which of course you have to, but involving boys in schools in adolescent years proved to be very effective. Told about what is manhood and what is the role of the father in a family. And that starts to change. It's hard to change a social norm, but that proved to be effective and in the long term with those boys. There are very good examples. Chicago, there's a famous program working with boys that only not help to address gender-based violence, but gender norms in general.
Yeah, I'd like to really just quickly throw in something maybe provocative on this question, because I think with social media, we've somewhat lost the battle now. With algorithms, you see that Gen Z and Gen Alpha boys are becoming more and more misogynistic. And I think, as you say, we can do as many great, fantastic programs as possible, but if you're not in the house with them, the phone's always in their hand. It's a constant battle for addressing some of these issues.
True.
Can I
Yeah,
add
of course.
something? So I would say that working on education, no? But if we go a little bit beyond, giving the proper value to care. So I think care is not valued in the society, is not recognized. And this is why also it's difficult to attract men in female-dominated areas, because it's not properly recognized, it's not properly paid when we are talking about paid care. So all of these negative connotations makes it very difficult. So yeah, education to work against these biases is the key.
It is true that men go where the money is, so when they see high salaries, we also see men. And there is some fields, which is the desertification of the fields. Suddenly when you see women, somehow the salaries are lower, right? It's like being a doctor used to be very well paid, now that it's less well paid. In some countries you see more women, etc. So teaching or caring, as you said, if it is more value, highly paid, then maybe we can see a switch, maybe. So I think, oh, there is a question over there. So we have the last.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, Sonia, yeah.
A very quick add-on in addition to the parenting leave policies. There is recent evidence that information can cause changes, not in norms, but in the behavior of women and mothers. So there was an experiment done in Switzerland that informed mothers about how taking part-time or not returning to the labor market would affect their long-term income. And they had a control group and a treatment group, and the treatment group was informed, and they saw that those mothers increased their hours after they were informed. So financial education might be one aspect of the story.
Thank you. Thank you, Sonia. And one last question, and then before we close.
Hi, this is Sharon again, and I just want to give a quick plug. I want to say a couple things. One, as a CEO of a national organization and someone who has worked for 26 years in this field and put many, many hours in, typically 60, 80 hours a week, I understand the value of work, but I also understand the value of moms in the home as well. So I just want to give a plug as we're thinking about filling that talent pipeline. Yes, that's important, but I also think there's something to be said for moms in the home. And I was able to have the benefit of working remotely, so I could work my hours around my children and still be able to do my job. And it has been the greatest blessing of my life to raise my 3 children. So I just want to put that in. I know that's a different voice than what we've heard today, but I will tell you they're my legacy, and they will tell you that they're very glad that I was home with them as well. So I just want to say that. Thank you.
Thank you. Of course, we also want to be home with them. I think COVID helped with the teleworking policies that we can actually do both. But let me finish here to start the next panel and thank the wonderful panelists, Victoria, Irene, and Marina, and the questions from the audience. Thank you very much.
Sit anywhere. We have five chairs. Take a chair. You sit there? I'm sitting over here, yes. I'll be on the corner here. I'm gonna leave my watch here because I want to make